amount of sense. And I'll show you where to find that later, but you go to kenspencer.com. When I finish the keynote, we'll go there first. Actually, why don't we go there right now? I'll just do that. So if I go to, hopefully the internet will be cooperating today. So at kenspencer.com, and you go over to, guess where? MacNexus. And if you click on MacNexus, it will, the most recent class recordings are always on the top. It's essentially a blog that I have running. So it'll go up to the top, and more than likely I'll upload this tomorrow, or late tonight, but look for it by Monday. And feel free, if you have questions or problems with that, you can email me at ken@empowermac.com. You see here pages. This was the class we did before. iPhone, iPad, that was in January. And then there's older ones. When you click on Go to Archive, it lists all the classes. Google Goodies, iPhone 6, etc. But you'll just click on one of these links and it takes you to a direct link to the YouTube. Now, it's everything you see on the screen and you hear me talking, and it's completely unedited, because otherwise it'd never get up there, because I'm so much a perfectionist that I work on it and work on it and work on it. And so I'm just saying, you look at the information's there if you want it. You can pause it, you can watch it from your iPhone, your iPad, or you can throw darts at it, whatever you want to do. And it's my screen, not me. Question?
What's the password for here?
There isn't one.
There isn't.
We'd love to be able to have everybody get on the internet, but it makes it so the instructors can't get on. So we used to do that, and it created a real problem. As you can see, it was already slow for me as it was, so I apologize for that. We've worked closely with the church, and we've improved the bandwidth here, but we're not ready to release the hounds yet, so to speak. So. I will point out also, you'll notice you'll notice it says Mac Sheet here. This is a little thing I put together called a Mac cheat sheet. And I encourage everyone to click on that without moving your mouse when you click on it. And you can download and print this. And it opens in preview. And as you can see, it's a repository for all your passwords and your information. And it prompts you for different ones you might not think about. You want to keep this in a fairly secure spot. In fact, you'll probably want to put it right where you keep your password sheets already, okay? Right next to the desk in a little book, okay? So.
PW.
Yeah. Nobody will look for PW. Then the second page is keyboard shortcuts. Obviously, this is for the Mac. The other one applies to all your devices. So that's there. It's free. You'll notice I do have some shortcuts. My phone number and email is on there. A little self-serving, I know, but it's there. Also, the Roseville and Arden Fair Apple stores and Apple Care Tech support. I've put those on there. So that's free for the taking. And I'll tell you later how you will also be able to print it for free. So someone has to remind me in the second half of the class actually how you can get paid to print. Intriguing? Few of you know the little trick, but you know, ink and stuff is expensive, but not when you know Ken's secrets. So, the recording started. We'll go through here. This is me, and my business partner Pete is teaching down there. A couple of you were in our class last weekend, had a really good time going over pages, keynote, and numbers. We have those about every 6 weeks or so. I also am able to come out to your site. I can do hardware, I can do software support. I can also do it remotely. A lot of you and I have shared screens, which is really nice. You're in your bathrobe and slippers and you don't know what I'm in, and I'm sitting in my comfortable chair and you're sitting in your comfortable chair, and I help solve things on your computer or even help you teach you things. So that's it. My current rate, my posted rates are $75 an hour for the first hour, $50 for each additional hour. But for MacNexus currently, until I'm just too swamped, it's $50 for the first hour, $35 for each additional. So when I do have fixed price setups, a lot of times, like if you get a new Mac and you want everything migrated, I can do a fixed price on that. It's usually $99 to just bring everything over. So that's enough of the sales pitch. You're welcome to ask me extensively about any of this service at any time you'd like. So yes, we've already started the recording. So we're going to talk about Apple hardware. We're going to talk about everything else. But you know what? Probably the most important thing that you can do is back up your computer. Okay? Who here is, and we won't single you out, but who here is not running TimeMachine and not backing up their computer? Okay. Any particular reason? Bet none of you have ever lost a hard drive. Go ahead.
Hesitation.
Hesitation?
Not comfortable with the understanding the hardware and so on. How does it work?
Great point. How does it work? Were you a PC user before?
Yes.
I could have guessed. And that's fine. Welcome to the Mac. And let me tell you how hard it is to get TimeMachine working on your computer. You can call Ken and you can pay me to come out there, or go to Fry's, go to Best Buy, go to Costco and pick up a hard drive and bring it home. You all know how to unbox it. Unbox it. If you get the smaller portable drives, it doesn't even need to plug into your wall. It uses power through the USB. You do not have to go find a drive that's Mac specific. Any hard drive will work. Bring it home. Unbox it. If you have to plug it in the wall, reach behind the desk, move things around, throw the oranges this way, and finally get it plugged in. And when you plug it into your Mac, most of the time, I'll say 90% of the time, a little screen pops up and says, I see that you have a new hard drive. Would you like to use TimeMachine? Would you like to use that hard drive for TimeMachine? And maybe you can wait 5 minutes and see if the screen changes or anything, and then finally say, well, yeah, that's why I got it. Click say yes, and it says, well, I'm going to erase that drive. Is that okay with you? And you think for a second, you go, well, it's a brand new drive. Yeah, go ahead and erase it, because the erasing actually formats it to work on your Mac. And you hit OK, and then a little screen will pop up like this, and it'll say, I'm going to start backing up at 120 seconds. And then you sit back and go get a cup of coffee, and you can sit there and watch it if you want, but that's how hard it is. So since 10.5, Apple has made that available in your computer, and it's really, really, really easy. Go ahead, Bart.
Is there any size drive that you recommend?
Yeah, good question. So the question was, any size drive I would recommend. The general rule of thumb is you want your backup hard drive to be about 3 times what your internal drive is. So if you have a 500 gigabyte, go get a 2 terabyte. They're in a sweet spot. But hard drives have gotten so cheap. I can go get a 4 terabyte hard drive at Costco for $169. I can get 2 terabyte hard drives when they're on sale for $99. They're kind of the sweet spot. 3 terabytes are in between. But yeah, the whole idea is hard drives are fairly cheap. And when I explain more how it works, you're going to see where it needs to be bigger than your internal drive. I'll show you how you can check your internal drive size. The other thing is how many of us have multiple Mac computers? Okay, the same external hard drive can back up multiple Macs, and in fact, it creates separate folders. So when I plug it into my MacBook Pro, it knows to back up that one and all its information. And when I plug it in to my iMac, it knows to back that one up. And let's say my iMac gets stolen or the hard drive dies. It'll know that that's the one that was connected to, or you actually have a choice. You say, well, do you want to restore the new iMac drive from your iMac backup or your MacBook Pro backup? And I'm going to talk about migration system in a minute, and that's also how you can bring all your data in. So it's really simple. Don't overthink it. Don't overanalyze it. And believe me, there's paralysis in that. A lot of people, I just don't know if I'm going to do it right. Well, first of all, you can never do something wrong when you back it up. Except I did. It's a sad story, and I'll tell you years ago, because This is really not the story about backing up, but it's more why you should back up. Years ago, I was an outside sales rep I had my own independent sporting goods sales agency. I was an independent rep through all of Northern California. And I had a PowerBook 140, neat little machine. It was my first Mac, had the little marble for a trackball on it. And that was back in the days of zip drives. And those of you that might remember SCSI interface, that was our interface on the back of Macs, before USB, before FireWire. So I had this extensive database of all my dealers and all my contact information, and it was incredible. And I decided, I'm going to a trade show in a couple weeks. I better back that data up in case something happens. So I went and got an external zip drive and a little zip disk, which I think it held like 40 megabytes. I can't remember. It was something that seemed huge at the time. And the little PowerBook 140 had these legs that flipped out in the back. And what that did, it propped up the back for better typing. And so it was kind of angled. And if you push the machine, nothing would happen. But I took my little brand new zip drive. I'm doing the right thing, right? I'm going to back up my drive. I reached around back for the first time to plug that zip disk or zip drive into the SCSI port. And as I pushed on it, it moved the machine forward and collapsed those legs. The back of the machine dropped 3/4 of an inch. So it just went from this to this, right? It was propped up on the desk and it just dropped that far. Ruined my hard drive. And you'd think karma was on my side because I'm doing the right thing. I'm gonna back up. I was in a panic because I needed that data. And I was making pretty good money at the time, but I needed that data. So I went and took it to a place in Nevada called Drive Savers down in Marin, San Rafael, Nevada, wherever. And they thought that they could recover my data. And I was in a bit of a hurry because I had the trade show coming up. And this had to be, it's over 20 years ago. $1,200. 20 years ago. But I was doing the right thing. I was going to back up. And backup wasn't as easy back then. I would have simply drugged the files and things. But it was a lesson learned, but I still don't back up as often as I should. But the moral of that story is these days with these backup hard drives and with cheap hard drives and Apple doing TimeMachine, there's no excuse not to back up. And there's no excuse to not back up multiple times. Think about it. The fire's rushing up Malibu Canyon, and you see people that are at their homes, the ones that made it up through the roadblocks to get to their home, or if they were at their home, what are they running out of their house with but their photo albums, right? Because that's important, because that son is never going to be 5 years old again. These days, where is our photo album stored for the most part? On our computer. So, but Ken, my backup's also in that same house. So yeah, you'd grab your computer, you grab your backup, run out the door, but what if you're not at home, okay? You should also have a second backup, more than 10 blocks from your house, and you should use it, you should back up occasionally. And let me tell you why that is. It's, again, let's say someone breaks into your house and your backup hard drive is right next to your computer. They're going to take both. What if your house burns down? And I say more than 10 blocks just to put it in people's head because realistically you want it a few miles away. But I always say if something happens that affects a 10-block area, you're probably not going to worry about your photos. The meteorite or the Armageddon has come. So I think that it's not that bad of an idea to take it and put it a few blocks away in a safe deposit box, at an office, at friend or family's house. And the reason you want to have a secondary backup is if that first drive gets gone, you've got it somewhere else. But let's say a beautiful day like this, you're out taking pictures in the garden. And you take 30 new pictures of the garden. Does that mean you should rush over and go get your hard drive and back that up? Not necessarily. Make it easy and convenient for you. But if you take a trip to Mozambique and you come back with 1,000 new photos, Then go get your drive and back it up. That secondary drive is, if you get to a point and you go, you know, there's stuff since I backed up last time that would be really critical if I lost it. And realistically, documents that you've created and things like that, tax forms, you know, so much of that is stored on our computer these days. It's important to have that secondary backup. And you can do the same thing with TimeMachine. You can have 2 different drives backing up to your TimeMachine. So people ask about Carbonite and some of the online ones. They work really well, except if you have lots of photos. And that would work as your secondary backup. You never want it to be your first backup. Let's talk about how TimeMachine really works. We're out in the garden taking those 30 photos, and we have a beautiful rose bush we're looking at, and we're taking pictures of it. And the neighbor's cat runs by. And you get a quick little shot of the neighbor's cat, and it's kind of blurry, but you upload all your pictures into iPhoto. You see the blurry cat, and 3 months later, you say, you know, I don't like that cat anyway. He always does his business in my yard, and I just, you know, it's blurry. I'll delete it. So you delete that, but you have the pictures of your roses and everything are still in your computer. Then 6 months later, your neighbor comes over and says, I've lost my cat. I remember you had a photo, and I need to make a lost cat poster. Well, you could say, cool, I didn't like that cat anyway. Oh, I don't know where that photo is. Or if you wanted to be helpful, it's not called backup, it's called TimeMachine because you can reach back into time. You deleted that photo 6 months ago, but it's stored back in TimeMachine. How useful is that if you had created a document that you deleted for one reason or another and you needed to go back and get it? You can reach back into TimeMachine and recover that. I have a client who, her Safari was messing up. This was a year and a half ago. And we actually went back into TimeMachine and grabbed an earlier version of Safari. And it worked perfectly. So it backs up everything, and it also saves anything you've deleted. Now, it says it backs up hourly, so it backs up every hour. Now, if I'm working on a project and I've just done a lot of work, I can go up to the top and say backup now, so I can force it to back up earlier. But as long as a hard drive is plugged into it, it will automatically back up every hour. Now, it keeps that backup. So the nice thing is the reason it says it keeps it for 24 hours. That's just, well, I'll show you another screen in a minute. Daily backups, it shows you daily for the month, up to the month, and then weekly backups. This is how your hard drive will look on your desktop once it's a TimeMachine drive, and this is the logo. But this is the timeline, and this is why it's TimeMachine. Remember I said it's hourly backups, and then it goes to daily backups, and then it goes to weekly backups. This allows you to not just search for certain things, but to go back in time to a time-specific point and look at what's in your folders, look at your iPhoto, things like that. From that, say, you know, I remember a week ago I had that. Let's go back a week and see what it is. So that's why the timeline is on the right side. Now, I can teach you how to restore from here, but my recommendation is don't. If you have a point where you need to recover something, talk to the people at the Apple Store or give me a call and have me work with you, because ironically you may bring something in that was old and there may be something new that replaced it. So you want to be careful of that. You only want to use this when you go find something that you're missing. Everyone, I hope I've convinced you to use TimeMachine. It's easy and it's very, very good. Go ahead.
What's the point of deleting something if you can't get rid of it if it's still there?
It's not, good question. So we have an internal hard drive in our computer, and we have the TimeMachine. You delete it off your computer to save room or delete it, and at some point it may get overwritten, kind of like your DVR for your, the oldest photo, the oldest pictures, the oldest programs get overwritten. But you delete it off your main computer, it's just there in case you need it. And believe me, if you've ever had to go get something that you thought you lost, it's there. But it's just a backup, and it takes up so little room, it's not a big deal. Did that cover it? Okay, Go ahead, Bart.
Does it just,
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Does it just back up your files you created, or does it also back up your applications?
Good question. Does it back up just the files or the applications? The way TimeMachine works is the first time you plug it in, it's going to take a long time to back up because it backs up everything on your hard drive. So much so that I'll show you how it works for migration in a minute. But after the first backup, which takes a long time, but while it's working, your computer will be slightly slower, only slightly, but you can still do whatever you want on your computer. And if it takes 2 hours to back up, then of course it's gone an hour since it started, so it will back up again and then it's done. Every backup after that is really quick because it's only new things you've created, new documents or new photos added. That's all it keeps adding to the backup. So it's not like it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger on the other end because it doesn't back everything up every time. It only, first time it backs up everything, then it just backs up only the new things. Okay, it's kind of a rolling thing, and that's how it keeps it very efficient. And there's a lot of stuff it does behind the scenes that is pretty amazing when you think about it. But what happens when your computer goes to sleep? Well, you're not making any new things anyway, so why would it have to back up? You just put your computer to sleep when it wakes up, and if there's new stuff, it'll just back it up. It's seamless. It's automagic. Let it work behind the scenes. Okay. People also ask about, well, I have iCloud now. Can I use iCloud for the backup? iCloud backs up, if you make documents in Pages, Keynote, and Numbers, backs up your contacts and backs up your calendar. But it isn't designed to back up all the stuff on your computer. That's too heavy lifting and there's just too much data there. Okay, Bart?
And what exactly all does it back up? Does it back up your...
Everything.
So...
Everything.
Just everything?
Everything.
Create? Oh, really?
Everything, not just that you created, it backs up all your software and everything else.
Okay. Does it back up your transactions that you...
Everything.
Facebook?
No, because they're not on your computer. They're on Facebook.
Oh, okay.
Just like your mail. It backs up your mail, but in fact, your mail is still on servers also.
So anything that's on the server doesn't back up.
So think about it. When you're in Safari and you're looking at Facebook, you never really download any of that.
Okay.
It's a small part in time that you're looking at. So there's nothing on there for it to back up. Just like you go to your bank website. You view your accounts. Well, it doesn't back that up because you were actively looking at a website. Okay. If I'm watching a YouTube video, that video doesn't really get downloaded. I'm viewing it and streaming it so it doesn't get downloaded.
It's basically anything that you create.
Anything that's on your hard drive. Anything on your hard drive, including your applications. And the best part is all your passwords and stuff that are stored in Keychain. So if you ever have, that's the best part about it, if you ever have to recover, you have a hard drive crash, think about all those places you've had all these stored passwords that you don't want to have to remember them and enter them again. Keychain remembers that and is stored in TimeMachine.
I've used it for quite a while, and it really saved my bacon once when I was reinstalling something. My backup drive is smaller than my newer computer, and I use a quarter of the hard drive space. You know, on the newer ones, I don't do that much in the way of graphics. But so it's beginning to delete some things, which I say is fine because it's not deleting anything that hasn't been changed or it's
right. I'll explain that process in a
okay,
sec. Go ahead.
What I wanted to do.
So our little scenario about the cat and the roses, okay? So I have my computer and I have my backup hard drive, okay? And it's a TimeMachine hard drive. So remember the scenario about the roses and the cat. So I took the photo, I uploaded the roses and the cat to my computer, right? It's in my computer. TimeMachine backed it up, right? But then the rose never left. The cat they both went to TimeMachine, so the rose and the cat. I wrote with the legs there. That's the cat. Okay, it's a blurry picture. Remember? Okay, it was a blurry picture of the cat. So in my computer, I deleted the cat, but the rose still exists in my computer. So what happens with TimeMachine is, first of all, when TimeMachine starts to get full, I recommend, because hard drives are so cheap, go buy a new hard drive and take this and archive it somewhere in a closet or something else, in case you have to go back in time and find something. Because when you start the new disk, it's from that day forward it starts holding new stuff. But in your case, what happens is, if you think about your DVR at your house where you record videos, if you don't watch a show, after a while it'll delete the oldest shows, right? Because it's a kind of a rolling thing. If you haven't said save it and you haven't watched it, the new shows will take precedent over the old shows. Well, what happens here is, if TimeMachine starts deleting it and it asks you first, hey, TimeMachine is full, can I start deleting your oldest stuff? So what that means is the rose is on the TimeMachine and the cat's on TimeMachine. But if I get to the point where I need to start making room on TimeMachine for new stuff, it will delete the cat if it's the oldest file that you have on there. It will never delete the rose because the rose exists on your computer. Does that make sense? The cat you deleted from here, and at some point it will get overwritten unless you decide to get a new drive. Go ahead.
What happens if you've got a bunch of pictures on your computer, you move out of there onto...
Don't move them out of your computer unless you want them deleted. Okay? Because there's 3 places we want if it's pictures you want to keep, first place is on your hard drive here. Second place is on your TimeMachine backup. And the third place is at somebody else's house, far away, right? If I delete those pictures from here, how many places will it be in?
2.
And it's only in 2 places, and you're vulnerable at that point, okay? I see people do this all the time when they have external hard drives. You can use an external hard drive. You can put an external hard drive on your computer, not as a TimeMachine backup, but just as storage. And if you put the photo that grows over here and delete it from here, you have to tell TimeMachine to back up this drive and this drive, and it will do that. So if you're, especially now with solid state drives coming out, the drives in the computers are getting a little smaller, so you can use an external, but you have to tell TimeMachine, and again, this drive and this drive can't be the same. Then the next question is, well, why don't they just put the rows on this drive? Because then the backup and the original are on the same drive, and what happens if it goes bad? Because you know what? Every drive fails. If you have a drive, it's going to fail. We don't know when, maybe 30 years from now, but hard drives fail. So you can tell TimeMachine to back up both these drives to TimeMachine. And then also this house is TimeMachine also. That threw in another wrench in it, but it handles it well. If you have room, keep those pictures here. But remember, you delete it from here, you're vulnerable because it's only in one place, and that's the drive. I guarantee you that's the drive that's going to fail.
All right, so you lose your MacBook and you have everything on there, those pictures. But you have everything back on the TimeMachine, get the new PC, new book. You just download everything back onto you? Or you just... Well,
this is where it gets really complex, and I make a lot of money helping people out in this situation, because when you're vulnerable, I can really, really turn the screws to you.
Yeah.
So you go to Apple. So your MacBook dies, gets stolen out of your car. You come home, or let's just say it's an iMac. Won't be stolen out of your car because you're not carrying. Actually, I'll do a MacBook. I'll try draw one here. Okay. Even if it was this got stolen or this, you bring this home from Apple, and you're staring at a blank screen. Doesn't look like my old one. What do? I plug this in to here, and believe it or not, when you first fire this up, it comes and says, you got a new Mac. Do you want me to restore, or do you want to transfer information from your old Mac? Don't have it anymore, right? But that would be an option.
Right.
Or do you want me to restore from a TimeMachine backup? And how cool is that, in that you think for a second, you go, well, why not? And you say, bring it from a time machine backup. And the cool thing is that Rose is here. The cat won't come in because the cat is back in the archive. The cat would be available if you searched it. But the Rose comes in, all your passwords, your desktop picture, everything. It looks and acts like your old Mac. Go ahead. That was a great question, by the way. Is that a follow-up to that question?
Well,
If not, the court will say no.
What about the software and all that stuff?
It all comes in.
You don't have to reload, you don't have to go through the time and...
How cool is that?
You just plug it in.
Now, if you use Adobe products, because Adobe hates you guys as users,
Yeah.
you will more than likely have to go deauthorize and reauthorize. You know what? You guys should be on a... You should stop using Adobe products as much as possible because they are making it very, very, very hard for you as users.
I think I have it, but I don't know.
But it would come over, and older ones work. And to be honest, Adobe tries to keep this piracy at bay, and what happens is they're making their registration and stuff so onerous, it makes people become pirates because it's so hard to deal with. But all your stuff comes in. All your stuff. You may have to reinitialize a few things, but it's so rare. And if you get a new Mac, I can also, if you have the here and you want to do the iMac, you can go hook those two together and do the same thing. Or as long as this has a current time machine backup, this one can come right to it too. It's wonderful.
Does it do everything automatically, or can you select what you want, for example?
Good question. I'll get to yours in a second. So he wonders does it bring everything in? You know, I had a bunch of crap in there I've been saving for years, and people accuse me of being a hoarder, but I watched that show and I'm really not, and you know. Anyway, bring in everything, because your new Mac will probably have a bigger drive than your old one, and once it's there, delete what you don't want. You cannot be very specific. You can be, but I recommend bring everything in and then delete it. I've had many times where people know they're going to get a new Mac, and they start deleting stuff because they're going to bring it. I don't want to bring all that crap over here. It's a new Mac. And then what happens is they delete something that's really critical. Bring it all in and delete what you don't want. Because the best part is if you delete something that you don't want and it turns out you need it, where do you go to get it? Okay? Time Machine is, it does everything. It won't do Windows, but it might do your Windows. Go ahead.
If you buy the new Mac and you got all the new stuff you want, and the old one is the real first backup that's full of
this one
cheap things like me that have old versions of software, it's not going to overwrite my new. It's not going to bring in a bunch of old Safari and stick them on my new machine. And go,
real good question. So it'll default to whatever's newest. Let's say the iWork, Pages, Keynote, and all that. If this machine doesn't have Pages and Keynote on it, it'll bring that in. It'll even bring in programs that may not work on here, okay? But it brings them in and then you can delete them. But it will not, it'll always let the cream rise to the top and it'll have the newest stuff available for you. If it has like the new version of iPhoto, the new Mac would come with a newer iPhoto. You might have like iPhoto 8 back here or something like that. It'll bring in all your pictures and everything, but it won't bring that program in because it's got a newer version of the program.
So you want to have like 2 versions of iPhone.
Correct. You might get like, but see the other thing is, when you get the new Mac, don't fire it up until you're ready to migrate. And the reason I say that is everybody fires up the new Mac, and I warn every client, when you have a perfect example, it's hard to do. You get this computer and you want to open it, but what happens is you create a new user, and the name is either the same or similar to your old user, and then when you bring stuff in, it either creates a new user for that, or it tries to overwrite your user. So the first thing you do when you fire it up is have your Time Machine or your old computer right there to do the migration, because it will make it easier. And I do a complete setup on a computer, 99 bucks when you get a brand new computer to bring all this in. Or if you want to do it yourself, it's really easy. You can do it yourself. Hey, how do I hook this up? And then I go and we walk through the screens. Boom, you're done. And I don't charge for that. You're doing it yourself. And worse. So what happens if you do something wrong? You're only copying this info. This still exists, and this still exists if you still have it. Remember, it's copying. It's not moving, it's copying. So you're never going to be vulnerable to lose anything. The best part about it is now we get this new machine, And it says, because you want to use Time Machine on the new machine, you have an option to start a brand new Time Machine backup, or it says, do you want to inherit the old backup, which means if the cat picture is still there, I can go back in and get the cat picture. Okay? As long as it's the same drive. That made it a lot more complex than it is. Let's think back to you plug it in and it starts working. Go ahead.
Back to, my book is divided. I have half of it still unutilized.
You have it partitioned?
I have it partitioned.
Why?
Because I do residential energy work and all that stuff is PC, and I got this book in part because it runs PC. And while I will be getting software.
That's the only reason to partition your drive.
That's yes. And so I will be getting software. I'll be putting there and doing residential energy work. That's all PC. And I'm hoping that the Time Machine will back that up too. Or is that in backup?
Are you doing it on a PC or are you doing it on a Mac? You're running Windows.
I don't like the PC. I like
are you going to run Boot Camp or are you going to run VM Fusion or Parallels?
That I don't quite know yet.
Okay, so if you're running, just quick aside. So by the way, I'll have to wash and shower after I say this. You can run Windows on your Mac. Okay? And there's 3 ways to do it. There's 2 programs, VM Fusion and Parallels, are a program in your Mac that allows you to load and run Windows in that program. And it's very fast and it's very good. And in that case, it creates you don't have to partition your drive for that because it actually creates its own little folder and all that gets backed up with Time Machine. But there's another way that Apple built in called Boot Camp. Boot Camp allows you to partition your drive and have a Windows partition and a Mac partition, and you in fact hold the option key and you either boot your computer into Windows or boot your computer into Mac. And when you boot it into Windows, it will be the fastest Windows machine out there. Now, what happens though is, when you're on Windows, you have to worry a lot about viruses. Now, I didn't plan him to ask that, but when I'm on Windows, I'm always like this. And I sanitize my hands. So, you're running Windows on a Mac. The Windows in Parallels and VMware can get infected. If you're running a boot camp with a partition, it can get infected also. But it will never affect the Mac side. Now, if you have to run Windows, tip of the day, go get free Microsoft Security Essentials. Microsoft finally made some virus protection and malware protection, and it's free. And it's very good, and it runs well behind the scenes. Windows has gotten better, but you know what? It's not a Mac. And certain things like that, you have to be able to run it. But you're safe, okay? But if you run VMware in Parallels, it will back it up. It will not back up the opposite partition.
I'll probably come see you when I do get into that. So.
Okay, and I'll wear a trench coat and an overcoat. Go ahead. Question over here, Curtis? Did you have a question? Okay.
Going back to what Time Machine...
Yeah, let's get away from Windows, huh?
If you update an application to the latest version, will Time Machine know, okay, when you... There's a backup to update that application? Because
you're thinking too hard.
What's that?
You're thinking too hard.
Oh.
It just sees that file's been changed and it knows to update it. Whether it's a photo, whether it's a let's say you're working on a document and you add 3 new words to it. It just says, oh, it goes by file date more than anything, or modified date. So it comes and says, okay, I'll back it up. We've beat Time Machine to heck, but I think it's a great discussion we had, and it's very useful. But let's remember how easy it was to start it out, and let's go from there. Yes, there's some certain anomalies that we can adjust to. And then people say, well, could I adjust it so it doesn't back up every hour? You know, why screw with it? It works. And I can always go up to the top and where the Time Machine logo is and press and say back up now. So it happens more often than every hour, just right then. That being said, the other thing is, we know our Mac really never crashes, very rarely, but sometimes programs can crash. iPhoto, iMovie, Pages, all of those have automatic save built into them, so you never really have to save. But I've had many times where we're doing complex things and the program will crash on us and become, spinning beach ball. And when you start it back, the program back up, you may have lost what you did for the last 15 minutes or so. Forget using TimeMachine for that because that's a little cumbersome. What I always recommend is, let's say you're making a book or a slideshow in iPhoto. When you've got about 15 minutes invested in it or 10 minutes, quit iPhoto, not by hitting the red dot, by going Command Q or quit it, start it back up, and then it takes any of the changes you've done and really sets it in stone. So if it crashes, it goes back up. It doesn't happen often, but it is a real important thing. It's the old day we used to say save, 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 save. Now, just every so often, quit it and put it back up. Because the other thing is sometimes it gets a little unresponsive, and that just helps it. And you should restart your Mac at least every 2 weeks. It self-heals. It's a weird thing. It's like, okay. So if you're having issues, I get calls all the time, and the first question, hey, well, actually, I get calls all the time is, my hard drive died or I lost my computer, and I hold my breath and I say, well, do you have a TimeMachine backup? And as soon as they say they've got a TimeMachine backup, I get a big smile on my face and I go, cool. If they say they don't have a TimeMachine backup, I mean, it seriously does sicken me because I know how bad it is to lose data. So, by the way, that $1,200 I spent, I got virtually all my data back. But it was today that would be $500 more than it was then. Carol?
Your example of when you're in iPhoto, can you not just go up to TimeMachine and back it up?
But that's different because it saves it in TimeMachine. My thing is that little book you're working, because then to show where I get the book, it's harder to recover. It's just easy to quit and restart. And I would just do that every so often. Like you were working on your audio projects, and you just did a half-hour recording. Quit it. GarageBand, I think you were using, or Audio Jack, whatever it was, start it back up again.
The program, not
the program. Yeah, and if the program if the computer gets a little squirrely and stuff, restart it. It really heals a lot of things. So, go ahead.
Is every time that thing spins, does that mean you crash something? Every time?
Not always. It might mean you're at Yahoo's homepage because it just yanks things to a crawl. I'm going to go over that a little bit, so let's talk more about spinning beach ball when I get into more about the hardware of the computer, which is after this slide. So, I had in the little MacNexus thing, well, first of all, we just talked about TimeMachine, which in essence, we've just talked about Migration Assistant. Migration Assistant is built into your Mac, and it allows you to do stuff. But everybody says, well, I'm on an iPad, and I'm on an iPhone, and I'm not even using my Mac anymore. Well, realistically, because it doesn't have a lot of data in it, you can take your iPhone and your iPad or your iPod Touch, and if you back it up to the cloud, who here has lost an iPhone or an iPad? Wow. Not bad. But if you do, you walk in, if you have iCloud backup on, and remember your first 5 gigabytes is free from Apple, it's kind of the drug pusher approach, they'll give you more. You take, and you can back your iPhone and your iPad, not up to your computer, you can back it up by syncing it, and that backs it up to TimeMachine. But if you back it up to iCloud, let's say I had a phone go bad. I go into Apple, I get them to replace the phone, I enter my Apple ID for iCloud. By the time I get to the parking lot, the majority of my stuff is back on my phone. So it works on our iOS devices very much like TimeMachine does for our Mac. But remember, our Mac might have 22,000 pictures in it. We probably don't have that many on our iOS devices. So iCloud works like that, whether it be new or a replacement. When you get a new phone or you're getting a replacement phone, you log into your iCloud account and it'll come over. Go ahead, Carol.
As you know, we have the MacBook Pro and the MacBook, and I'd like to know how to make iCloud available on the MacBook.
You can't unless you're running 10.7 or 10.8.
Lion?
Yeah.
That's what I have.
Okay, then you just go into iCloud preferences and turn it on.
Okay.
And that syncs with your address book. But the only thing, remember on the Mac, iCloud isn't your backup for your pictures and everything. That's on your iOS device. On your Mac and your iOS device, essentially 4 things. Your mail doesn't get backed up anywhere because it's on a server realistically. Your old mail gets backed up into TimeMachine. But we have notes, reminders, address book now called contacts, and iCal now called calendars. Do get backed up, or they actually get synced with the cloud. I've had a cloud class before. Just basically what that means is I have my Mac, my MacBook Pro, I have an iPhone, and I have an iPad. All of these devices, this device, this device, this, oops, this device, what do they all have in common? They sync to the cloud. You don't see this doesn't sync to this, this doesn't sync. They all sync to the cloud. The cloud's the intermediary. That's the clearinghouse. That's the data warehouse where when I put in a new phone number on my iPhone, it goes to the cloud and then propagates down to all my other devices. Okay? That applies to calendars, contacts, notes, and reminders.
And my book right now goes to the cloud.
Your book?
My notebook, I mean my MacBook. I mean,
if you're running 10.7 or 10.8, Lion or Mountain Lion?
I am. It's when I'm outside, but it's in a building.
No, okay, so it's a great question. So the cloud is this ubiquitous term. I don't know if you're aware, but the little cable that you hook into your computer is called Ethernet, right? Yeah. It's like a bigger version of a phone plug. It's officially called an RJ45 and Cat5, Cat6, but that is called Ethernet. So they kind of were the initial days, the ether. It's out in the ether. The cloud just happens to be, believe it or not, the cloud, the iCloud we're talking about, is over in Maiden, North Carolina at Apple's $1 billion data facility there, which they're actually duplicating up in Redmond, Oregon. Not Redmond, Washington, but Redmond, Oregon. And that's where it is. The cloud is just your way of envisioning that it's not wired to anything. Don't be intimidated by the cloud. When it's working, it just is happening. Okay? So it is a computer in North Carolina. So, but everything connects to it. Siri uses this same computer, which we'll go over Siri in a bit. But I want to talk a bit about notes and reminders. And I'll go into it on my phone here after a bit, because I did want to highlight that. But basically, reminders and notes. Reminders is kind of synced with your calendar. A reminder can be time, location, or dates. Time, location, or not specific. It's a to-do list. But notes is really neat, and I'll show you how I do notes later. But the big thing I want to point out is they go to the cloud. So I make a note here, it goes down to here, and that's the Notes app. And that's only starting in 10.8, I believe. Who here is running something that's not Lion? 10 Snow Leopard or before on their Mac? Okay, is it hardware reasons is why you can't really go beyond that? Well, do you have iOS devices also? Okay, so you're running Mac. So it's one of those things where I'm of the philosophy, if it ain't broken, don't fix it. But what I find is there's some compelling reasons for me to upgrade this stuff with notes and reminders and things. And you know what it is? It's finally, technology is making my life and your stuff a little easier to manage. And I think there's some real tools to that. But again, I don't force anybody into upgrades or anything like that, because I believe if it ain't broken, don't fix it. But if it's compelling enough to make you want to go forward to it. If you're running 10.5, anybody from 10.5 or newer can run TimeMachine. That's real. Yeah, so. And if you don't have an iOS device, iPad or iPhone, there's no compelling reason to have to go to the cloud, to be honest.
No, I wouldn't think so.
No. Go ahead.
If time permits, can you go over what needs to be done to upgrade? I've got Leopard and I want to upgrade to Mountain Lion.
Sure, let's do that in the second half, and make sure you ask that, because there's some reason. What I usually tell people to do is email me your serial number on your computer to see if it can go to Mountain Lion or Lion, because it's hardware specific, and everybody thinks that Apple's trying to make everything obsolete. Now what they're doing is the processing power, which I'm going to talk about after this, actually coming up in this slide, or in the next slide, is it's just got to have enough power to do the things it wants to. So I want to de-geekify the parts of a computer. Because if you think back, it was, well, it's a gigafactory of this, and the guy points out, he might as well be speaking another language. And that does nobody a service. So I find when we go to buy new things, whether it be an iPad, an iPhone, an Apple, and even Windows computers, it's important to know what the main three parts do. So I kind of put together a little, I always try to think of analogies that make it a little more apparent. And I use the analogy of the computers is, it's like a library and what a project that you're going to work on. So unfortunately, I meant to have this come in one at a time, but I was running late this morning, but I did put this together. But we're going to go across the top row. And Keynote, I should have made it. Anyway, if you're going to go work, let's say you have an assignment that you need to do some research on blah. And to get the information on blah, you need to access 30 different books to get the information you need. Well, Homer Simpson has a brain, we have a brain, and there's nothing we can do to change our brain. And we're going to go to the library, and we're going to see all the books in the library, and we're going to have to grab 30 of those books to do our research project, right? Well, if I get up there and I've got a small table like this, you can see how hard it is to have those 30 books spread out on that table to access them all. Where if I had a big table like this there, I could spread all the books out and write my footnotes and keep going back and forth. Hi, Marilyn.
I can't.
So if I can spread it out, my research will go quicker. So the brain doesn't change, and the library is what the library is. It doesn't matter to you if the library has 200,000 books or 1,000 books, as long as it has the books you need, right? Makes no difference how big the library is. So we equate that to a computer. The Intel chip, the CPU, stands for Central Processing Unit. Aren't you impressed? CPU is the brain of the computer. When you buy the computer, you might have a choice to get a slightly faster one or a slightly slower one, etc. But the brain is whatever you got the computer with, okay? And to be honest, the little bit faster speed doesn't make a big difference when you're purchasing a computer, okay? It's not dramatic. I'll go over to the library. Again, remember, it didn't matter how many books were in the library as long as it had the books we need. Your computer hard drive, some people call it memory. It's actually storage. Your files, your photos, your documents, your iTunes music, all your programs are stored in your library, and it's storage. But Ken, if I have 10 gigabytes of space or 20 gigabytes of space, doesn't that extra 10 gigabytes slow things down? Do the more books in the library cause you to do your work slower? You don't even care about them. They're superfluous. So, up to a point, as long as your hard drive doesn't get too full, which is something that's critical, as long as your hard drive doesn't get too full, putting more files on your hard drive will not affect your computer speed at all. Well, I've heard about defragmentation and all this other stuff I should do. It's a modern operating system. You don't need to defrag your disks and all of that. Just let it run. Do not get MacKeeper, which you probably see these ads. It says, oh, I can do all this. It's the devil's spawn, okay? It's preying on the fear, uncertainty, and doubt. MacKeeper's terrible for your computer. Don't get it. They just want to get your credit card number and charge you monthly. But the one thing we can affect the difference of is the size of the table. Remember, I'm working at the table with all my books. I get all the books from the library. I'm sitting at the desk. And if I have a bigger table, I can be more efficient. The more RAM, RAM, random access memory you have inside your computer or, in fact, on your iOS device, the better it can operate. That doesn't mean I can open up 3 photos at a time in iPhoto, but It allows me to open the newer, bigger photos that the cameras are making, or a big video file, or I can have Pages and Mail and Safari open at the same time. You asked about Safari. Yahoo homepage. It is very, very full of all kinds of crap trying to get your attention, and it slows things down, and it sucks up your RAM. Go ahead.
Real basic question, but what is iOS again?
Oh, I'm sorry. That's the operating system for the iPhone and the iPad, etc. It was called iPhone operating system, but then the iPad came out, so they changed it to iOS. These run the Mac OS operating system, and the iPhone and iPad is the iOS operating system. OS for operating system. In fact, to say iOS operating system is redundant. Believe it or not, the iPad uses essentially, the base is all based on the Mac OS operating system. So RAMs, it's very crucial, that happened 3 to 8, but it's very crucial to have a lot of RAM. And I recommend one, and RAM on virtually all your machines is very easy to upgrade. It's something I can do for you in about 5 minutes, but it's something you can also do yourself quite easily. So many times it takes taking out the old RAM. Now, so the other thing is when you go buy your computer, well, Ken, when I go to Apple to buy my computer, should I get it with lots of RAM? Not necessarily. Remember, the brain is what you want to decide to buy, what size, how fast the brain is. You know, we always could use a little faster brain. The storage, the size of the hard drive inside the computer is something that you want to set when you do it, but there's no need to go out of your way to get extra RAM when you buy the computer, because aftermarket you can get it for a very good price. With the exception of the Retina MacBook Pro, it isn't allowed to be upgraded aftermarket. Go ahead.
Is there a limit? I mean, if you've got a Mac that's a few years old, is there a limit to how much RAM you can upgrade to?
Yeah. So the question is if I have any Mac, not just an older one, but any Mac, is there a limit to how much RAM I can put into it? Yes. And it's kind of like in, you know, the older computers, the hard drives are smaller. They found a way to put more data on the hard drive, making them the same size. The RAM, they found ways to cram more memory into those RAM modules. And the thing is you couldn't in an older one, you can't just throw 16 gigabytes in it because it actually won't recognize it. So yes, there are limits. And when I get off of this, I'm going to show you a website where I go to get that stuff. And they have a chart that shows you what your computer will qualify for. And you can always email me your information, and I'll send you back links to what would work on your computer. So the iMacs, believe it or not, it's just a little user-accessible slot in the bottom. The MacBook Pros, you got to take the back plate off. It's pretty easy to do. So again, the brain, the amount of workspace you have, and again, this allows you to keep more programs open. And since our photo files, you know, at 12 megapixel camera makes a pretty large photo, that will take up a lot of RAM and storage space. And like we talked about, an external hard drive, remember? That's like putting an annex on the library. It's like putting a second building on the library. Okay? Doesn't slow anything down. Did that de-geekify it? Does that library scenario kind of help? And that's really all there is a computer. The rest of it's a PCB, a printed circuit board. But they all just kind of connect. There's some fans in there. You know, in the Apples, there's actually an ambient light sensor, so it tells how much light there is, so it takes your screen darker or lighter accordingly. Same thing on your iPhone and your iPad. That was the... I always make a slide where I throw all my artwork in. AppleCare. It's one of the few extended warranty programs that I like and believe in, and I used to say do it with a laptop, but these days it's also pretty good for an iMac. The way AppleCare works is every Mac, whether you buy it from the Apple refurb store or from Best Buy or online, comes with a 1-year parts and labor warranty, and this applies to the iPad and iPhone too, and 90 days of telephone tech support. If you purchase AppleCare for the Mac, it adds on 2 more years of phone tech support and hardware support. It doesn't cover misuse or anything else. And the Apple geniuses have a lot of latitude, and even if you're outside of AppleCare or outside of your warranty, they're pretty good about repairing things if they can.
3 years.
3 years total from date of purchase. So what I tell people is you can either buy it at the Apple Store when you buy it, it's an auto-enroll thing, or I say just make sure you put a reminder in your calendar to purchase it within your first year. And there's some places like LA Computer Store where you can buy AppleCare at a bit of a reduced price. On the iOS devices, there's AppleCare and AppleCare Plus. They only give you 1 additional year for a total of 2 years. The AppleCare Plus, if I take my phone and I throw it on the ground, God forbid, I've dropped it on the ground, you buy AppleCare Plus for $99 for your iPhone and it will cover you for damage. Not loss, because that's a hard one to prove, but for damage. So I crack my iPhone, I pay $99, and I crack my iPhone within the first 2 years. I pay a $50 deductible, and they give me a new phone, and I can do that twice. So it's nice protection.
The other day I was using my new iMac and I scratched the screen. Is that covered?
Were you having sword fights?
I have all this screen desk and had a button on it, and I picked up the screen and put it up against me, and I put a little scratch.
I hug my iMac all the time too, but I'm really careful. That actually is it an iMac with an aluminum frame? Is it a silver aluminum?
It's one of the big skinny ones.
Kind of like me, huh? Big and skinny. That screen is replaceable. And it shouldn't be too expensive because it's held on by magnets, believe it or not. Magnets and computers, who would have thought? And what I do to get into those is I actually put suction cups in each corner and it just comes out. There's little locator pins. So I would contact either CoreCare. They're an authorized Apple place. Email me. I might be able to find a place online that has them. I'm not an authorized Apple repair facility, and I can't get those parts. But you could also call the Apple Store and find out how much it would be to replace it. It's a glass. Is it in an area that's pretty? Do you notice it a lot?
It's not actually that bad. I was just inquiring.
Yeah, but that's probably the least expensive part you could replace on it. Now, AppleCare wouldn't cover that because that's the same as throwing it down a flight of stairs, and it just covers any manufacturer's defects and problems. Okay, but I'm sorry that happened. That's such a beautiful machine, but it wouldn't be too bad to replace it, to be honest. All right, so I'm just going to go through the hardware here real quick. MacBook Airs 11 and 13, they're really lightweight. MacBook Pros. The Retina display, the problem with the Retina displays is you pay a lot because they have solid-state hard drives. Let's talk about that for a second. Who knows what an SSD or a solid-state drive is? Do you know the difference between that and a regular hard drive? If we go back to the screen, remember the library, right? That was the hard drive. The library was the hard drive. Well, they have these new things out called an SSD, which is a solid-state drive. Old hard drives, in fact, let's go back to that screen. So, traditionally, we've had hard drives like this that have these platters that spin up to 10,000 RPM. Most of ours spin at about 4,500 RPM, 5,400 RPM. And see these are little arms. And they're magnetically controlled back here. And if you ever hear your hard drive going, that's those arms moving. And they slide across this platter. Think of an old, we can all remember old vinyl LPs, can't we? So think of a vinyl LP with the needle going across. But in fact, it never touches the disc. It hovers above it and it's magnetic. It's reading it like a magnetic tape, okay? Remember my little laptop that I dinged the hard drive? What happened when it dropped is this was over the platter, and when it pinged, it hit the disc, and that's why I had to pay $1,200 to have my data recovered. And I was lucky they could recover it. But this goes back and forth a minute. So it's spinning, and it's kind of like, this is exactly kind of the way an optical drive, a CD works. It uses light. This uses magnets. The newest thing is, They essentially take RAM, which has no moving parts, and make it be the hard drive. And that's a solid state drive. Actually, during the break, I'll try to bring up my YouTube video. This MacBook Pro, I had a 1 terabyte spinning drive in it, and it'd take over a minute to boot up. It boots with a solid state drive in about 13 seconds. But more than that is, everything's instant. Think of your iPad and your iPhone. You don't wait for things, it just happens, okay? That's a solid state drive. The problem is, it's like having a really small library. They don't have as much room for all your files, but they're getting better and better and better. I just put a 500 gigabyte solid state drive in this, and that's pretty good size. They used to be over $1,000, and I got it on sale for $279, so they've dropped dramatically. Bart?
I think they'll eventually have like a solid state exterior drives.
You can take and put it in an exterior if you want, but first off, put it interior to do it. But yeah, you can put it. It plugs in. It doesn't. Your computer doesn't know whether it has a solid state drive in it or a spinning drive. It just plugs in. It's generic in that direction.
I was just thinking, one of the advantages of solid state is I assume that they don't crash as often, or can they crash at all?
They can get corrupted, but they don't have, since they don't have, okay, so a hard drive can fail mechanically, or it can fail from its electrical structure, or it can be software. The only thing it's eliminated is the fact that there's nothing mechanical that can fail. So it's got one less likelihood of failure. All right, so anyway, MacBook Pro, the new Retina MacBook Pros, they use solid state drives, so they're going to be limited on your size. Remember I told you can upgrade your stuff afterwards. You can't on them so much. You had a question back there?
I'm the same with the only other thing I would say is solid state is a smaller package.
They can be put, yeah, they can be put in a smaller enclosure, but you just basically put them where the other one is. But they still have some size. Because what it is they're full of chips. And those things get smaller and smaller all the time. The Mac Mini, hardly anybody talks about it anymore, but it's great. It's about $800, and you just hook up a regular monitor or a keyboard to it. The new iMacs they're interesting. They no longer have a CD or optical DVD drive in them. You have to use an external for that. They're very thin, but when you look at it from the front, it doesn't make any difference. The screens are gorgeous, but the one thing I'm impressed with is they create virtually no heat. If you take an older 27-inch iMac, they get pretty warm, and the majority of that's from the display, believe it or not. The new one, I have been blown away. And if you want to compare that, go into the Apple Store, or go to Best Buy, or go to Fry's, and they've been running all day. Just put your hands on them and you'll see. And to me, I like the cooler running machine because, you know, you're near it and it permeates a little heat. They've gotten better. I mean, the old iMac G5s and the G5 towers, you know, people used to, that would heat up your room. And the newer ones have gotten better. And it's still, because what it is the chips are very powerful and they're crunching a lot of data. Well, they actually can go ahead and they do it much more efficiently. So I'm pretty impressed with them. I would recommend, if you can, to go with the 27-inch because you have, remember the RAM, or the part we can expand, there's 4 slots instead of just 2 slots. So if you're going to do heavy lifting with programs, that would be much better. There's the old Mac Pro, which they think is going to be a new one. When you buy a Mac, it usually comes with just a small keyboard like this. It's wireless, but you still do have available a wired keyboard that has a 10 key on it. Those of you that do a lot of stuff in Quicken and things like that, like the 10 key. And I do too. You have an option of the Magic Mouse or the Mighty Mouse? Magic Mouse and the Magic Trackpad. The trackpad is, you can do a lot of gestures. I can zoom photos in and out very much like I do on the iPhone and the iPad. The mouse is neat because it's no longer a scroll wheel. You just simply move your finger up and down and the pages scroll. But it comes stock with the
You can do it laterally too.
Yep. It's a whole touch surface. Now, if you get the new Mac, it has wireless keyboard, wireless mouse. you can get rechargeable batteries from Apple. And, you know, yeah, it's from Apple. Yeah, it costs $29. You get 6 batteries with it in the charger. But there are 2 things. These are a new type of battery. They're done by one called, they do a similar one you can get at Costco called Eneloop, E-N-E-L-O-O-P. And those batteries hold their charge a long time. That's been the problem with most rechargeable batteries is you leave them on the shelf and they don't hold their charge a long time. But the other cool thing is with this Apple battery charger is, once the battery's charged, it sucks no energy out of your socket. I mean, so infinitesimally small.
Very little phantom.
Yeah, very little phantom memory, okay? Or phantom power. So what I do, it comes with 6 batteries, so if you got a keyboard and a mouse, just keep it charged in all the time and cycle your batteries through, and you'll never have to buy batteries for that again.
What's the battery called?
Eneloop is the ones from Costco, and it's the same battery as this one from Apple. And to be honest, they're about the same price. I think Samsung makes the Eneloop, but it's not where Samsung copied Apple. They were doing it a long time ago. E-N-E-L-O-O-P. And you want to use the chargers that come with them or the Apple one. You know, your MacBook Pro can run 2 monitors if you want to. I'm a 2-monitor person. I love it. I always have this plugged into one. The iPad, we'll palm through these because we're getting ready. We've got the break coming up here. iPad mini. Ever since I got the mini, I never used my big iPad anymore. And it's really funny because I finally sold my iPad 2. And it was like, I picked up the old iPad. I go, God, this thing's heavy. And it's like, I'm thinking, boy, what a wimp. But it really, for me, my up-close vision is quite good. If you have vision issues, if I'm looking at a text on this and looking at on a regular iPad, I'm seeing the exact same amount of area, so obviously the text will be bigger on a big iPad. So I recommend people try them out. I have a tendency, I can see up close quite well, so the iPad mini works very well for me. It's very compact. I can put it in my pocket and do that. I don't have to carry a man purse around all the time. So. Okay.
Are there any differences, mechanic meaning performance-wise, or anything between the 2 of them that you would say, oh, this one is much better?
Great question. The features and functions are exactly the same between the iPad mini and the iPad 2, or 3 or 4, excuse me. They're all the same, basically. This screen is, the new Retina is beautiful. Probably creates a little more heat, but functionally, everything you can do on one, you can do on the other. There's no difference in that regard. And then the other thing is you can decide, every iPad comes in now 4 sizes. 16, remember we talked about RAM, okay? But remember, it's really weird because in here, when you say it's a 16 gigabyte iPhone or a 16 gigabyte iPad, that's the storage in it, okay? That's the library. There's no hard drive inside it, but really when you're talking about a 16, a 32, or a 64 gigabyte iPad or iPhone, that's the amount of storage it has. You don't have choices on the amount of RAM, and you don't have choices for the brain. The only choice you have is how much storage you have or how big a library you want. And every incremental jump from 16 to 32 to 64 to 128 is a $100 plateau, okay? So, and admittedly, Apple makes better margin on the more expensive one because it doesn't cost them that much to do the incremental upgrade, but it does give you a way along the way. With a lot of the cloud now, do you need a big one? Not necessarily, unless you're going to carry around a lot of movies and stuff. You really can sync this thing a lot. The only other option you have on these is whether you want a black or a white screen, and then the other thing is whether you want it to be capable to use the cellular network or just be Wi-Fi only. And we'll probably go out a little bit on that after the break because we're getting close to the break and that's a little bit of a long discussion. Okay, I'll take a couple questions if there are any, and then I'll turn the recording off for the break. Everybody looks dumbfounded. I know, it's a real geeky thing. Hopefully I de-geekified it enough for you. But go ahead and take a break, and let's start up at in 15 minutes. So, the break's usually 20, so let's do 1:42. How's that? So let's shoot for 1:40. And feel free to come up and ask any questions.